Hello, dear participants of third Executive Model OIC. I would like to greet you all on behalf of Eurasian Regional Center of ICYF. That project is being implemented by ICYF-ERC in the partnership with the Ministry of Youth and Sport of the Republic of Azerbaijan. Today, our guest is Dr. Farid Shafiyev, Ambassador, the Chairman of the Center of Analysis of the and you can start. At the end of the session, we will have our participants will have a chance to ask a question. So thanks a lot. You can start.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me briefly, because some people might not be aware about our center. Center of Analysis of International Relations was established last year in 2019 in February. It's the public funded think tank. Our goal is to both to analyze but also to educate. That means we do some analytical work for the government and also we might do for some private entities. But also to educate, that means to get involved with educational establishments, with journalists, with media representatives. So far, you know, our activities, it's, as I said, we started formally in February in 2019, but actual work began in August. So it's less than 1 year. Our focus, of course, our regional matters, the issues, the Azerbaijan, South Caucasus, countries around us, Russia, Iran, Turkey, Central Asian region, Black Sea. We focus definitely on the Armenian-Azerbaijani conflict. We, by the way, run courses on Armenian language in our center. Unfortunately, due to the lockdown, we had to stop the courses, but hopefully we'll resume now, probably in the fall. Will be new recruitment if somebody would like to learn the Armenian language in Azerbaijan. I think there is a big demand for that. With regard to the topics of today's discussion, COVID-19, post-COVID-19 global order. Let me underline the trend among expert community, which I would say majority of experts, they tell you that, you know, it will be completely new global order. This is a turning point in human history. Just few days ago, or today, maybe even, I saw this article today. The famous historian, Margaret Macmillan, she wrote that article in Economist, indeed calling this what we see now as a turning point in modern history. Guru of international relations like Henry Kissinger also said that, he also published an article underlying that we will have completely new global order after the pandemic. And you can find also various predictions about what we're going to face, what the international community are going to face in the wake of the pandemic. I probably belong to the minority of experts. And I believe that we won't have really any new global order. What we will have as a result of the pandemic, most probably is, well, not most probably, this is definitely looming, is the economic crisis. Yes, it will be probably the deepest economic crisis since perhaps the Great Depression, in terms of the drop of production. Probably we will have something worse than for example, the last crisis, financial crisis, 2008, 2009. Um, that's that's the reality, and that's the impact of COVID-19. The COVID-19 will also have impact on national health system, maybe the way how we travel, similar to what happened after 9/11 terrorist attack. I'm speaking about the attack by Al Qaeda on U.S. soil, the 2001. After that, for example, air industry, airports, they changed the protocol, they enforced security measures. So something like that will happen with, again, maybe with air industry, with trains, and that definitely, and also we speak about healthcare system. It's obvious that, you know, healthcare system needs much more stronger support from the government. We might have some also especially I would say in Western world, some new social habits. I don't think it will be really radical change in social habits, but yes, for example, in East Asia, during winter season, you anyway, before pandemic, you would see people wearing masks in Asia, in China, in Japan, in Korea. You know, it's kind of after, especially the first outbreak of SARS in 2003, that was the habit in that part of the world. That might come to the Western hemisphere too. But I don't envisage, I don't believe that global order, as we, you know, from scholarly point of view, the global order will endure any significant or radical change or changes due to the pandemic. I believe that after a few months, we'll come to I would say, new normal, which is new normal. Yes, it's the modified old normal. If we'll face the second outbreak of the pandemic, which might happen in the fall, that again will put the strain on the economies, national economies, also on healthcare system. Probably will be the second wave of lockdowns. But again, when we're speaking about the global order, we're speaking about architecture of international relations. And let's go and one by one, let's analyze the predictions and what's going on with the pandemic. Okay, in terms of the architecture, the global powers, system of global powers, United States, now the second, I would say, China, the third, Russia, and European Union. I don't think anything will change significantly. Somebody predicts that China will rise again, that the Western world will be destroyed by the pandemic. I don't think so. We see that Western world, even the United States, with all the hardship, they have enough resources to withstand pandemic. Yes, again, I'm not speaking about particular economic crisis. I'm speaking about their power, military power, intellectual power, their soft power, their both soft and hard power. So the competition between global powers, like the United States and China, that might be exacerbated, might worsen in the context of the economic crisis. But again, that was not caused by pandemic. Let's remember that the rivalry between United States and China happened before. Competition happened before, you know, the pandemic. It's about 10, 15 years as China now the challenges the power, unilateral power of United States. We have also Russia, but I think the Russian influence is limited due to its economic decline. Yes, in terms of the geopolitical adventures, Russia has some say. For example, we see that Russia plays a role in Middle East, in Syria and Libya. But again, I think it's just limited adventures with no real impact on the situation in the Middle East. We'll see at least. I mean, in limited sense, of course, Russia has a leverage and power in its neighborhood. In post-Soviet countries, definitely. A bit further, as I said, in Middle East, maybe. But that's it. China has different power projections. But again, that trend was before pandemic. It might continue. As I said, it might be exacerbated due to the economic crisis. I mean, the competition and rivalry between the United States and China. But again, it's not the pandemic. The second, it's about globalization. Many experts predict that the end of globalization. They point to closed borders. Again, I think it's just temporary. If you look at globalization from economic perspective, I don't think we have any alternatives to the trend of globalizations from economic perspective, because the things like outsourcing, the production chain, which now developed for decades by multinational corporations, are not going to disappear. They are not going to change dramatically or radically, because we see that it's just the law of economics. The labor costs cheaper, let's say, in Asia, and that's why the production goes to Mexico, from United States to Mexico, or to Asia to China. Yes, I might agree that, for example, some countries might pull out the production from China, like, for example, Japan. Japan promised to its companies some compensation if they will remove production from China to Vietnam or to some other countries. But still, we're speaking about not returning production to the countries of origin of their multinational corporations. We're speaking about to outsourcing to in other countries, let's say from China to India, to Vietnam, to Indonesia. I believe still the Asia will remain production hub in the near future, including China too. I don't think that it's possible just for short period of time, just remove the whole production. We're speaking about multi-trillion dollars production in China. So China will remain, I think, in the near future, the production hub. And some other countries like India, rising powers in Asia. So that means that the flow of cargoes, flow of goods between West and East will remain back and forth. Yes, temporarily we see the closed borders, but in a month or two, the borders will be lifted. And by the way, speaking about, if we leave aside the passengers, the flow, yes, because of the airlines, because of the closed borders, the lockdown, now we don't see people moving from one country to another. But actually, the cargo flow between Asia and West did not much drop. It might drop a few points, few percent, because of the looming, as I said, economic crisis. But I don't think that we will have again radical or the fluctuation. Actually, for example, the cargo flow through Russia, through so-called Northern Corridor, has increased during lockdown because many companies now prefer train routes, land routes, rather than the sea routes, because on the sea, with the ships, with the vessels, there is much more risk of the contamination, and while for example, crew of the ship might be contaminated or infected, let's say, and then the ship will be locked down. But with the train flow, when you put the cargo and you ship, it goes from China through land to Europe. You don't have that kind of the threat. And including speaking about the land routes, the so-called middle corridor, what China, Central Asia, Caspian Sea, Caucasus, and Europe, with the segment of Baku-Tbilisi-Kars Railway, which Azerbaijan built or financed the most of the part. Actually, the flow through the Baku-Tbilisi-Kars Railway has also increased during the lockdown. So that's about the movement of goods. So that's the very important part of globalization. Yeah, when now in our feature of globalization, it's the online. If somebody might remember the book by Friedman, "World is Flat." It was written something around 2004, 2005. It kind of was proponent of globalization. Protagonist, Friedman was the protagonist of globalization, and he is protagonist of globalization. In that book, he also envisaged that the businesses, the barriers for businesses between countries will be removed. Online business will be increased. That means, for example, we have Zoom. We will have more. Yes, maybe some businesses will move from the office to home office. The workplace will be modified, but that means actually even more globalized world, because I will be sitting here in Baku, somebody, my co-worker, will be sitting in Europe or in Asia, will be working online on some common projects. So that's, I believe, the second very important component of globalization. So any prediction about end of globalization, I think they are not sustainable. They are not true. The pandemic actually might partly, not pandemic itself, but pandemic through the economic crisis can decrease or let's say put on hold temporarily, only temporarily. But overall, the forces which has driven globalization so far, we will be present after the pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic. The cultural globalization, that's a bit challenging. Yes, with the rise of nationalism and maybe with economic crisis, we might see more conflicts, both ethno-territorial conflicts, resource-driven conflicts, or identity conflicts. But again, I don't think it will be a drastic increase of conflicts. What we have, it will probably remain. Somebody also predicts the destruction of European Union. I'm very cautious. I think overall, if you don't listen to certain propaganda, I think European Union overall is coping quite well, despite all this hardship in Italy and Spain. But European Union overcoming the challenges posed by the pandemic. We'll see how it goes in the future, because yes, the European Union pledged a big bailout, and that definitely put a strain on national economic systems. But again, I think the European Union as a project will remain. Maybe the maximum what I can predict that one or two countries will leave European Union, which even I doubt. So European Union, I believe, will stay in place. Another important discussion is about the threat from the increased surveillance. Different predictions about how the government is going to control the movement of people inside the country. Surveillance cameras, even somebody speaking about under-skin chips, which will be implanted. And then the government will be monitoring people, how they're moving, if you are infected, to know where you're going. That actually happened, this trend of surveillance from the government happened before. Again, it's something which would happen before the pandemic, not now. if you look at the last 20 years, and it's both, people speaking about prevailingly surveillance in China and in some other countries, but in the West too, you always street cameras, online transactions when, financial institutions track you, every purchase, every use of credit card, your movement through the online reservation, etc. That was present before pandemic. We've heard about the intrusion of the softwares like Google or the iPhones into your privacy. That's perhaps the something which will be present in the modern life with the modern technology. And partly, yes, it's the government trying to control your movement, but also the people sometimes voluntarily giving their privacy to all these applications. You download hundreds of applications on your smartphone because it's easy. You have the banking application, you have the booking.com application on your phone. And it's the people also because doing that because of just the convenience. It's the convenient to use all these applications. It is our life. The Uber and some other applications. So I believe it's nothing. It's not so much related with the COVID-19 pandemic. It's just a trend of our modern life. So that's the second, I would say, the threat, which again, not really related from the COVID-19. And I believe at least the democratic societies can find the way not to eliminate, because probably it's not possible to eliminate this surveillance system, because as I said, voluntarily people giving up their privacy, but at least to limit the intrusion of the state into private life. So overall, I believe pandemic will not change drastically the global order. We will have economic crisis. It will put a strain on national economic systems. Of course, there are always bailouts. Somebody have to pay in the future. The resources which some countries accumulated, they might be exhausted in a year or even half year from now, because now the government's using those funds. Countries, we have a drop in oil prices, we have drop in many resource-based, the resource-based economies definitely might suffer heavy loss. But again, I think the recovery will come in a year or maybe maximum after 2 years. What we've seen in the past economic crisis, the worst period, 2 years, 32, 33, 1932, 33. That was the worst period of the crisis, and then recovery came. We had crisis in 2008, 9, and then recovery began. We had the crisis before 1997, 98, Asian crisis, the bubble economy, also 2 years, and then recovery came. We had oil crisis in Azerbaijan, for example, 15, 16, and then recovery came. So I think we should not really be so pessimistic about the global order, post-COVID-19 global order, unless indeed something else will strike I don't know, some disaster, global scale disaster, or the second pandemic, some new virus. That, of course, might really, it's endangered the whole, I would say, the whole human civilization. But if that, we speak only about COVID-19, I think the recovery will come in 2 years, and we will have the same global order which we had before, with some modifications. Again, we speak about the national health systems will be modified, the way we travel, the way we communicate. Some businesses will go online, but even like speaking about the bigger share of online education, I don't think I'm teaching the online courses now at IDEA University. I don't think the online education really can replace the real actual presence in the classroom, discussion in the campus, etc. I mean, the online education has some limitations. It won't replace fully the traditional education. Schools, children. I mean, schools, it's not just place getting information. It's schools for kids especially. It's a place for socializing, learning how to communicate with each other. So that's the school place. They remain the vital, important element for kids, for children, to be there in the campus, in schools. Again, it's not the first pandemic. The humankind, our civilization went through the worst pandemics, the cholera, plague, Spanish flu, the last one, the worst one was in 1918, 1919. And by the way, if we look at the Spanish flu pandemic, yes, the pandemic of 1918, 1919, what's called Spanish flu pandemic, it has affected the way that the countries began. It's the let's say birth of modern national healthcare, public healthcare. That's after that, the governments realized we need one national system to cope with threats like that. Something like that might happen with after that COVID-19 pandemic. But if in terms of the global order, despite the fact that the Spanish flu killed more people than the First World War, but if we look at how the global order has changed, it's the First World War actually was the cause that we've seen the birth, for example, of League of Nations, and then after of the League of Nations, after Second World War, we've seen the system of United Nations system, the birth of United Nations system. It's the wars. The First World War, Second World War, rather had big impact on the global order rather than pandemic, Spanish flu pandemic. So I believe that we will cope with that too. There's some good news that, despite all predictions that the countries and people will start fighting for resources, if you look what's happening around us, that these businesses trying to help people, to help educational institutions, artists, the singers, they go online giving free concerts. We see really altruism. The world is different. I don't think world is now, it's different what we had in 1918, different what we had in 1933, and different from the 1945, the last global war. So we live, yes, with all these conflicts, with all these inequalities, and yes, inequality is actually increasing. That's the challenge. But still, the overall, if you look at the figures, how many people, were lifted from the poverty, how many people has now universal education, how many people has access to clean water. Still, many people don't have, but still, I would say relatively. The world is much better place than it was a few decades ago. Probably I will stop on that, and if you have questions, please go ahead.
Thank you, His Excellency, Ambassador Farid Shafiyev, for delivering a very interesting lecture. We have a couple of questions. If you don't mind, we could proceed to this session.
Yes, please.
The first question is from the Bangladesh. As we talk about global trade and transportation, how do you think that this as Chinese opportunity to implement the One Belt, One Road initiative, and it might also affect the global political power dynamics?
Yes, interesting question. Again, as I said in my lecture, I don't think we will see the radical change in the flow of goods between East and the West. Again, Asia will remain the production hub, China and our countries around it, Bangladesh too. But with Belt and Road Initiative and maybe with some, say, with the always some negative rhetoric surrounding China, the Belt and Road Initiative might have some drawbacks. But, you know, I still believe that the routes will remain, routes between Asia and the Europe and back and forth, you know, in both ways. And second question was, sorry, was what about political?
It was about it might also affect the global political power dynamics. I mean, they are talking about these superpowers and the balance.
Yeah. Yeah, the predictions that, for example, the United States will diminish its power, will suffer the loss, and China will rise, or vice versa. China will suffer a loss due to, you know, the drop in production. Again, I would say it will be temporary. I don't think in the near 5 years somebody can challenge, first of all, the power of United States, or even 10 years. I'm speaking about maybe for the next 20, 30 years, we don't know. But the US dollar is still the global currency. I don't see somebody or some other currency can challenge the dominance of US dollars. And that's the one factor of the dominance of United States. Despite some decline, again, some problems within the United States, it's still global power. I don't think, and it's not only hard power. Remember, it's also soft power. We're all watching the Hollywood movies. It has also the music. Let's say Anglo-Saxon, UK, UK, British, American music, American culture, the English language. So it also underpins the power of the country. That I don't think will change. With China, again, it might suffer some temporary loss. Neither China will be able to overcome the United States in 5-10 years, but I don't believe also that China's power will be significantly diminished. It will remain the powerhouse, the production powerhouse.
Thank you, Dr. Shafiyev. The next question is about the rise of right-wing forces, political forces in the Caucasus. As it is a new phenomenon, but however, we should admit that tendency is growing, especially in our neighboring countries. I would like to hear you about your opinion that what will be post-pandemic situation and its effect on right-wing forces in the Caucasus.
Yeah. That's also a global trend, which you know, we see last 10 years, populists coming to power, right-wing populists mostly. Well, we had some left-wing populists too, like in Greece and Spain. But overall, when we're speaking about right-wing populism, it's the global trend in many countries, and South Caucasus didn't escape that trend. Populism is spreading in our neighboring countries, in Armenia and Georgia, rather not in Azerbaijan, and maybe because Azerbaijan has much more centralized control system of power, which plays positive role in this context. Because the populism, indeed, I think the dangerous phenomenon. Populism caused more conflicts. Populists, they tend, you know, to get short-term gains so without looking at the future, you know, long term. And sometimes even those short term, we're speaking, it might be only a few days or a few months. The interesting phenomenon we can observe in Armenia, we have populism. The new government, which came in 2018, came with the slogans of liberalization, democracy, but they turned also into nationalist populism, with Pashinyan declaring, you know, that Nagorno-Karabakh is part of Armenia, referring to, you know, mythologies, you know, the time of great Tigran, King Tigran the Great, and all those things. Yeah, that's the quite dangerous trend, danger coming from populist exist and might be, you know, definitely worsened during the economic crisis. That phenomenon also might, we see this strengthen in Europe, in European Union, some European Union countries. Again, hopefully people will be wise enough. But one good thing about this populism, at least we're speaking about the Caucasus, it's the balance of power. Out of three countries, the most strongest in terms of economy, Azerbaijan, where the Caucasus surrounded by some regional powers, but also creating the balance between like, the populism is very dangerous if it's, you know, happens in powerful country, in Germany or in Russia, in United States, because that with all this hardware, with the power, military power, it might bring the country to the collapse, to the war. What happened with the Hitler nationalist populism? It was also sort of the populism, that ideology. But in small countries, it's only really, it's threatening the country itself. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. The next question is about the priorities of the states after the COVID-19. As you know, until now, the main states invested in the economy to gain economic growth and in some extent in the military sphere. However, the COVID-19 showed that there is a lack of very good medical healthcare system in all countries. So what do you think? After the COVID-19, will it change? Will our priorities of the states will change, or it will be same as it was before the COVID-19?
Yeah, during my stay, the commentaries, I told that the Spanish flu pandemic, 1918, was the turning point in terms of the birth of national healthcare system in the modern world. What pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic, manifested that indeed national healthcare system should be strengthened, that the government, not the private sector, because during pandemic, private healthcare, it's not helpful. It's the system, state system. It should be strengthened in all countries. More money should be invested in hospitals, in beds, in the modern equipment, in the training of and education of the medical personnel. I expect that we might see the improvement in healthcare system. This is at least what let's say the environment demands from the national governments.
Thank you. Mr. Shafiev, we are receiving a lot of comments about the...
Yeah, please go ahead. If somebody does not agree, that's fine too.
Yes, about the future of the globalization, especially after your comments. For example, some participants saying that globalization works on trust. There will be not just economic consequences, but also irrationalism and xenophobia, which in the past led to the demise of universalist culture. As for me, the COVID-19 will also be a reason for the extinction of the globalization. So there are some comments about the future of the globalization and the future of international organizations. Maybe you could share your own opinion and assessment of the role of organizations.
Yeah, globalization has definitely several, let's say, features, and I said that the economic, which I believe won't be affected. Speaking about the cultural globalization of universal culture, demise of universal culture, the rise of xenophobia, it was actually present before the pandemic, might be worsened in the context of the economic crisis. But let's admit, with all these challenges, with all the rise of nationalism, we still see prevailing culture. You know, yes, it's the Western influence culture with the pop music, Western influence pop music, with the English language, with the computer, with the social networks, the Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And you can, I see, especially among young people, many common features. Yes, and certainly we have nationalists, we have the people deeply religious, but how much? I would say, yeah, depending on the country, can be different percentage, but still that culture is there. Whether that will be changed dramatically after COVID-19, somebody who wrote that comment, he of course is entitled to his opinion, but I don't think it will drastically change. But international organizations, that's the challenge. Yes, there was comment about the World Health Organization, the criticism, and United States, for example, really pulled out the support for WHO, and United Nations is also under attack. But what will be I don't think they will disappear. Still, the countries around globe, they need some platform for discussion. I think they will all remain. Definitely, they need to be reformed, especially World Health Organizations and also United Nations. And we might see those reforms. We might see some of our new organizations coming to power, or maybe we will see few organizations extinct. That always happened. You know, we had some regional organization which was rising and then disappearing. Temporarily, we might see more protectionist measures to protect, for example, the food, the health supply. But again, when the economic crisis will be gone, I think everything will come back to normal. But I only agree that the international organizations should be thoroughly, drastically reformed.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And then you talked about the maybe emergence of the new organizations, and maybe some of them will be dissoluted. However, some comments that we are receiving saying that maybe some new countries also can born in the new world after this COVID-19. Taking in the point that COVID-19 showed that some centralized governments cannot afford, how to say, well, medical supplies to their regions. And in this sense, maybe there's a need for more, giving more power to the local authorities, and that context, the right of self-determination, and etc. So maybe you could comment on that.
Yeah. Actually, the many comments saying, you know, the centralized government more successful in coping, like China, successful in coping with COVID-19. Though I don't think it's whether centralized or decentralized. It's more the discipline, you know, the system. For example, we have Germany, which is democratic country, in a sense decentralized. We have the federal, you know, the units in Germany. No, I don't think so. Even like in countries which was hit harder, like Italy, region, northern region, or United States, certain states, New York and some other states, which was hit harder than others. It showed that they need better coordination, they need supply. The Italians brought to the Germany for the treatment. No, I think in times of crisis, we need more centralized, more coordination. So I don't think that kind of local, of course, the local authorities also play a role, but they need support. They cannot cope with pandemics on its own. The comment about the emergence of new states, it is always the process. We had the birth of new states. We had South Sudan. We have East Timor. We had what else? Eritrea. And every 10 years we have the birth of one or two states on the global scale. That might continue too. Mostly it's again related on ethno-territorial divisions, the conflicts, rather than on the pandemic.
And also, as you are the chairman of the Center of Analysis of International Relations, some people asking that as a CEOs, at the head of companies, and the head of centers, what people in their business mind see the after post COVID-19 world, especially in the light of the huge unemployment, especially among the youth. So what do you think about that? How the states will be arranged?
Yeah, that's the challenge again. That's why I'm saying that we need more support from the central governments. We need support from states, from the governments. Unemployment is now in many countries now is the big challenge in the United States and some other countries. So we need support, the welfare, the countries, rich countries, where can afford to pay. Poor countries, unfortunately, cannot. And why, again, we will have the economic crisis, which will affect the life of many people for the next maybe 1, 2, maximum, I believe, 3 years. But recovery will come. So maybe, actually, there's theory that the Black Plague, which struck the Europe in, if I'm not mistaken, 16th century, it was the cause of the future industrial revolution, because the Black Plague basically wiped out almost a third of population of Europe. There was big shortage of labor, and that was the reason why the countries and generally the production, manufacturing began, not the hand production, but hand labor, but production. Machines came into existence. So with that kind of situation, sometimes it forced people to find solution. So solutions might come in different forms. Even before pandemic, if you remember, some countries tested, Switzerland, I believe, or Finland, they tested the system of minimum payment, minimum salary. So whether you're working or not, they're giving you minimum salary just to survive. It might also be the case. The second, maybe for the youth, more works doing online. And also, I believe we had very huge wave of urbanization in maybe during the whole 20th century. People moved to the cities because of the demand and etc. And we see now actually the shortage of labor in agricultural areas. Some countries doesn't have enough resources and enough labor resources to pick up the harvest. So we might see actually for economic reason, but also for health reason, because in the villages, in isolated areas, you have less chances to to get some infections, diseases. So people start moving back to the villages, back to the agricultural areas. That might be a solution.
Mr. Ambassador, we would like to conclude with the last question from Iran.
Yeah.
Our participant is asking that, do you believe that the arc of the history will depend heavily on whether the post-coronavirus United States embraces constructive internationalism or attaches to its current foreign policy under President Trump?
Well, yeah, United States historically was, before the Second World War, it was isolationist country. It came as a global power only after 1945. So it's the relatively new phenomenon. And the ascendance of Trump to power indeed showed this trend. They would like go back to isolationism, and which might happen with the United States. But we'll see it. Trump might be only a temporary phenomenon, so maybe he won't survive the next elections, 2020. But the Trump is symptomatic to what's going on in the United States. It's the division between those, as I said, traditional isolationist tendencies in US foreign policy and those globalists, which, let's say, came to power, came into dominance in 1950s. So that struggle continues, but important thing is the American economy, very inequality within the United States too. If it will continue like that, yes, I'm afraid that the, what we see currently in American foreign policy, that might be continued. But I don't think, one thing I think I should stress that Trump doesn't have any consistent foreign policy. It's not isolationist, neither the globalist. It's something in between, because he's not ready to pull out from, and he cannot pull out because US foreign policy is designed in a way that it's controlled not by one person, like in some other countries. It's controlled by many, not even like parties, but many forces, multinational corporations, agricultural, lobby, the military lobby, and so many factors in American economy. So it's hard for me, speaking frankly, I wouldn't dare to predict what will happen in these upcoming elections. But both tendencies are very strong in the United States, globalist and isolationist.
Thank you, His Excellency, for answering all the questions, very detailed version, and giving this lecture today. Thanks a lot for joining us today and accepting our invitation. If you have any closing remarks, please feel free to share.
Oh, it was a pleasure to talk, and always our center is open. The people can visit our website, aircenter, AIRCENTER.AZ. On the English, we have two versions, Azerbaijani and English. Look at our resources, opportunities. Definitely due to lockdown, we are not fully operational, but we have opportunities for internship, for scholarship, and we publish pieces mostly related to our region. So we're open to further cooperation. Thank you very much for organizing this.
Thank you. Thank you very much for joining. Thank you.
Bye.